distinction that he makes between knowledge and opinion. Opinions about which people use a great deal of rhetoric to try and manipulate and persuade others. And knowledge which is gained and transmitted by the art of dialectic. Transmitted is actually the wrong word. Because if knowledge of unchanging truths is innate from a previous existence of the soul, as Plato holds, then we don't transmit knowledge. We elicit what is already there, innately. But it's elicited by the dialectic. And the intent of the Socratic method is, of course, to do the eliciting, to bring to birth the ideas with which people's minds are pregnant from their previous state. And in contrast to that, of course, while knowledge is then certain, rationally grounded, opinion is relative, changing. Because, even in the case of perceptual beliefs, opinion is based in experience of changing particulars, temporal processes. And our experiences tend to vary from one to another in the course of time. So that experience is an unreliable source of knowledge. At best, it provides you with a changeable opinion, which, in fact, may work in practical situations. But there's a distinction between what might work for some practical purpose and what constitutes knowledge in the sense of gaining unchanging wisdom. So that distinction, I hope by now, is pretty clear. Before we move on, any questions that have arisen in your minds or elsewhere in you since last time about this?
If you say that opinion is unreliable or temporal or whatever,
yeah.
How can you explain, or will you talk more about Domino and how he talks about tethered opinion as knowledge?
Yeah, there are two possible responses to that. One is that in a variety of the dialogues, Plato is trying to think through, dialectically, what is knowledge. And consequently, you have a series of progress reports on his own quest. And perhaps the best that he can come up with here or there is that knowledge is true opinion supported by reasons, which is one of the things he proposes in the Theaetetus. You see. Now, to say it's true opinion supported by reasons is to say that it's tethered by those reasons. And so it's firmed up. Looks like it's true. Though elsewhere, and certainly in the Parmenides, but also in the Republic particularly, he rejects the notion that knowledge is any subset of opinion, because it is gained differently than opinions are gained, namely by means of dialectic rather than on the basis of experience, even when it's been cross-examined. Okay? So that may be that it's a progress report. On the other, it may be that it's simply as far as he chooses to pursue the thing on that particular dialogue. You see, part of Plato's art in giving a dramatic setting to any inquiry is, the purpose of that art is to arouse people to inquiry, rather than to set forth a systematic position. The Meno is not a systematic treatise that Plato would stand by as his final conclusion on things. It's, as it were, a chapter in an unfolding story. And, of course, the first explanation suggests that at the time when he wrote that chapter, he wasn't aware of what the final one might be, which might actually be so. After all, how many of us are there who hold to exactly the same view of some things as we did, well, let me say to you, 5 years ago? And certainly on philosophical matters. Yes. Oh, yes, there may be some continuity, but you change your mind along the way about certain things. So it's conceivable that Plato did something like that. And you may note in some of the discussion as you read the secondary source material that Plato's scholars variously distinguish certain stages in Plato's philosophical development, characterized by certain of his writings. So you get the early Socratic dialogues, which seem to be not exactly transcripts, but pretty true to what Socrates did, you see. Then there's a middle period of dialogues, which seem to be very much in the spirit of Socrates, though perhaps taking it further and fictionalizing it more. And then you get the mature dialogues in which Socrates appears, but Plato gets beyond even Socrates' method and launches into long speeches about things, which certainly in the early dialogues doesn't happen. So, stages in his development. All right, now this afternoon, we want to move from the epistemological side of Plato's divided line over to the metaphysical side. From the nature of knowing to the objects of knowledge. What is it that we know? And it's pretty plain from the diagram itself, in addition to the reading, that the object of knowledge is not the world of particulars, the world of time, change, decay, that all around we see. Strikes me from that hymn, change and decay and all around I see. It's a good Platonic hymn, the theme of it. No, because opinion is all we can have about things that change. So the objects of knowledge have to be another kind of reality, a different kind of entity than sticks and stones and puppy dogs' tails and cabbages and kings, and such like. And the term that Plato uses in talking about them is the term idea, which, as you can see, gets very quickly elided into the English idea. But the objects of knowledge for Plato are not what we customarily call ideas. Ideas are mental states. Ideas are notions, concepts, that, as you say, come to mind, or you think of. Now, that's not the kind of mental object of knowledge, that Plato's talking about. So even though the term is idea, it is better translated, if we're going to be clear and avoid the ambiguity, it's better translated form, which actually comes from the Greek morphe, which is introduced rather by Aristotle than by Plato. That notion. Forms rather than ideas, then. Gives us a clearer notion. What he's talking about is variously discussed in the history of thought, and we'll see these notions as they arise. At times, they're called archetypes, where an archetype is a pattern. It's a model. It's the first pattern that everything else follows. Okay? So in that sense, the form provides an ideal, a model. And so rather than calling it an idea, you might call it an ideal. The form is the archetypal ideal for a whole class of things. Humanness as the archetypal ideal for all humans. Horseness for all horses. Though perhaps to avoid ambiguity there, we should say horsety or something of that sort. The Greeks have a suffix ikos, which gets it without ambiguity. Or the ideal of justice as the archetype for all acts or policies, people or situations that you can in any degree call just. Yeah. These are ideals. Plato himself, in one passage in the Philebus, which we're reading for next week, calls them patterns. And then he's not happy with the term pattern, for reasons I'll get into in a few moments. But the thing to keep in mind, then, is that while these forms are ideals for classes of things, they are themselves real entities of an immaterial sort. You see, the notion that there are other kinds of entities than material entities, physical ones, should come easily to anybody in a theistic tradition, where the prime example of a non-material being would be God. And in Judeo-Christian tradition, the concept of the human soul is an immaterial entity, at least in the hereafter, separable from the material body. You see. So you have two examples of immaterial entities. Well, Plato's saying there are more examples, namely forms. The form of justice, the form of humanness, the form of love, the form of equality, as for instance of race. You see. Forms, in fact, of qualities, forms of species and kinds of things, and forms of different sorts of relationships. Now, can you get that? Forms of qualities, kinds of things, and relationships. And the examples that he's particularly fond of have to do with moral qualities, virtues, and other values, moral and aesthetic values. Okay? So you have objectively based moral ideals. You see. Plato was in that sense a moral absolutist. Objectively based moral ideal. But he's also fond of talking of mathematical forms, both in terms of mathematical relationships, which are logical relationships, and in terms of numbers and geometrical figures, which by Pythagoras were all conceptualized in terms of numbers. So what you have then is a whole realm of things. A realm of things which somehow or other, this world of particular things is in varying degrees like or unlike. Or to use the language that Plato introduces, particulars participate in these forms. And you can't help but observe, of course, that to say particulars, let's see, particulars participate is a tautology. What is it to be a particular but to be one which, same word, participates? You see. A particular is a participator in something bigger. In this case, in something more ideal, more normative, and incidental. You see. So you get, if you like, particular exemplifications of those forms. The forms, will you notice then, can be regarded as universal and therefore unchanging. He says eternal. Whereas particulars are always changing, and as he puts it, temporal. Universal in the sense that each form is the ideal for a whole class of things. It's universal with respect to that class. So the form of humanness applies to the ideal for every human individual, every particular human being that ever has been, is, or will ever be. Universal for the whole class of human beings. The form of justice is universal for everything that anybody might probably call just. It's the ideal of what it could be. Ideally would be. Okay. So the vocabulary that develops includes the term universals. And the medievals had long debates about theories of universals. Found all sorts of theological implications in theories of universals. How can God be one and three? Three particulars, one universal? Said somebody, that's tritheism. Not monotheism, but tritheism. Well, how else can we conceive of that? You see? Well, you know the way in which the Chalcedonian Creed puts it. One in essence, the essential nature. Universals get to be known as essences. One in essence, but three in personal subsistence, hypostasis. That's the vocabulary of Greek metaphysics applied to the doctrine of the Trinity, 453 AD. And the medievals took it much further in detail, in argument. But notice that it's going to have implications not only for theology, not only for ethics, but for mathematics. Any math majors? Into the foundations of math at all? You see, theories of universals apply to mathematics. What is a mathematical object? What is mathematics about? You say, well, if you're doing geometry, mathematics is about lines, geometrical figures, touching certain points. What do you mean a point? Well, you know the way a mathematician describes a point, as location but no dimension. In other words, it doesn't exist. It's an ideal entity, not a physical particular, space-time particular. What's a line? It has length and no breadth, so it doesn't exist in a spatial world. No, a straight line is an ideal entity, not a physical particular. Mathematics is dealing with ideal entities. Sure, and you get a Platonic interpretation of mathematics. Now, that's not the only interpretation, because other theories about universals, or that there are no universals, also have their applications to metaphysics, to mathematics. Oh, you remember that at our department colloquium last Thursday, Scott Chadin was discussing a chapter from his doctoral dissertation on a nominalistic view of musical composition. And we had a very lively time, as one or two of you were there, recognise, and we're continuing next week. But in that nominalistic view of musical composition, you see, nominalism is the view there are no real universals. So he's trying to develop, and trying to see what an aesthetic would be like that doesn't talk of universal musical structures, you see, but sees every particular ingredient of a composition as a particular physical event unrelated intrinsically to anything else. How would that look? Well, next week he's going to be discussing criticisms of a view that Nicholas Walterstorff has developed in his writings on metaphysics, on aesthetics of music, to the effect that music is dealing with universal aesthetic potentialities inherent in the very nature of things. Sort of a quasi-Platonic view. Well, my point is that the theory of forms, which he is developing, is going to have tremendous ramifications for all other disciplines, you see. But it's not brand new. All that Plato is doing, in effect, is saying, we live in a rationally ordered cosmos. Get it? He is developing Heraclitus' logos concept in a much fuller way. Or Anaxagoras' nous concept, that there's a rationality behind things. You see? There is a cosmic order in which there are kinds of particulars, kinds of relationships, kinds of qualities that we can identify and see logical relationships between. A rationally ordered universe. And since the qualities and relationships include moral and social ones, you have a social order and a moral order that's objectively ideal. An ideal of cosmic justice, as we saw it in Homer and Hesiod, you see, is going to continue, be much more fully developed in Plato. Well, this is the direction he's going. And we'll keep coming back to it. Now, what we get in Plato, then, is the first big metaphysical system in the history of Western thought. Now, it's an open-ended system, in the sense that there was development and change as he began to work it out and expound it. When we get into Aristotle in another week or two, we'll see that Aristotle's is another system. He was a student of Plato, so it's sort of an adaptation of Plato's. But it's much more of a closed system, in the sense that he seems to have it all worked out all in one package, with very little variation as it develops. Plato's more open-ended, or suggestive, of course. But the point is that I want to make that as we look through the history of thought, we find a succession of what I call metaphysical models, which provide the context, the structure of thought behind the philosophy that's going on for hundreds of years, underlying the science, the art, the social structure, the ethics, the whole of everything on the shish kebab. Yeah. And if we think roughly in these terms of the Greco-medieval period, okay, of Renaissance and Enlightenment, and then of 19th and 20th century, which includes Romanticism, existentialism, and what now is known as the postmodern